Hi, my name is James Koehler, and I'm here to talk to you about whether or not school buses should be mandated to have seatbelts installed on them or not. Imagine yourself as a school bus driver. You're driving a 40-foot long vehicle on a highway or a county road with adverse weather conditions, and you have 50 to 70 students, and you're dealing with discipline, and you're required to do all of this with your back facing the students. So the challenges of a bus driver are already very, very high. Would adding seatbelts be an advantage and make the bus a safer place for students to ride? First, let's look at the scope of school bus activity in the United States. In the United States, there's a total of more than 440,000 school buses that drive daily. Within those 440,000 school buses, there are over 24 million students that drive, or that ride twice daily. That doesn't include extracurricular, that doesn't include the sports activities. So 24 million students in 440,000 buses. According to an article in www.today.com, the 440,000 school buses travel a total of more than 4.3 billion miles per year. So with the 4.3 billion miles and all these hundreds of thousands of buses, how many students are dying as a result of bus accidents? Well, according to that same article on www.today.com, 6 children on average die per year out of 24 million. In comparison, when you compare that to students that are transported either by car or walk or some other mode of transportation going to school, almost over 800 children die every year walking, biking, or being driven to school. So that's a humongous comparison, 800 per year to 6. So school bus drivers, as I mentioned, must care for at least up to 50 to 70 passengers at a time while driving a 40-foot bus. They face adverse weather conditions. However, despite all these challenges, school buses are still proven to be the safest mode of transportation to and from school, despite the lack of seatbelts. So, what about school bus safety without seatbelts? Since 1968, there was a law that required seatbelts in all passenger cars. However, that did not apply to school buses. The reason for this is because school buses were designed differently to have a different type of safety restraint. And that type of safety restraint is called compartmentalization. So rather than seatbelts, it was determined that it would be much safer to use compartmentalization. In addition, large buses are much heavier than smaller cars and even light trucks. And therefore the weight and the crash damage is distributed differently to the passengers. So what is compartmentalization? Compartmentalization is when you use the interior of the bus, and the interior of the bus is what provides the occupant protection. So in order to use that interior of the bus, you have to have higher seating and specially designed seats that absorb the crash energy. So it's padded, the seats are padded, and when the student's properly seated in the bus seat, then when there is a front end crash, the student will go forward into the softly padded, energy absorbing seat rather than being restrained into the seat itself. And so therefore the seat in front of them takes that damage and the seat behind them if they go back. The crash data over the past 40 years has shown that compartmentalization is effective in protecting school bus passengers. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, in a study that was conducted in 1989 found that the addition of lap belts did not improve occupant protection. And this was found at nhsta.com. So the question then, after going over compartmentalization and the use of seatbelts, is should seatbelts on school buses be mandated? Currently, there are only 6 states that mandate the use of seatbelts on large school buses, and that is California, Florida, Louisiana, New Jersey, New York, and Texas. And that's for buses that are weighing in over 10,000 pounds, the larger buses, not talking about the small buses, which are required to use seatbelts. But currently there is no federal law, so there's only 6 states that are that have jumped onto the law mandate, and that leaves 44 other states that do not require it. Why is there very low support from their legislation to require seatbelts? Is because there's very little way to enforce seatbelts on school buses, and legislators know that. According to a study in 1989 from the National Academy of Science, they completed a study of ways to improve bus safety and concluded that the overall benefits of requiring seatbelts were insufficient to justify a federal mandate. What is the cost of seatbelts? The cost of seatbelts, according to the NAPT, National Association of Pupil Transportation, estimates that fitting school buses with seatbelts averages between $7,000 to $15,000 per school bus. With seatbelts phased in over 10 years, because that would be too much money for states to handle, over a 10-year period, that would have a minimum cost of $117 million per state. And that's according to the www.today.com Alex Johnson information. With growing fleet sizes and deteriorating state money, seatbelts on every bus just may not be economical. Adding seatbelts has added little to bus safety, and that's been found according to many crash studies. So, what are driver concerns about seatbelts and the risk of seatbelts? Students can and do use the heavy buckles as weapons, which would injure other students. It's too difficult to ensure that all students keep their seatbelts on. There's no way for a bus driver who's driving at the front of the bus and looking ahead to be able to enforce the use of seatbelts. Therefore, compartmentalization just makes sense. In an emergency evacuation, panicked or disoriented students might not be able to get out of their belts and find themselves trapped. And that's according to NEA.com. Is there a better option than seatbelts? School bus drivers feel that strong administrative support for school bus discipline issues and adding more bus aids would have a much higher impact at protecting students than adding seatbelts. What is the major cause then of school bus related fatalities? The highest number of school bus related fatalities are pedestrian related. In a study conducted by the NAS in 1989, stated that children are at greater risk of being killed in school bus loading zones than in buses. More effort should be directed at improving school bus unload and load zones than adding seatbelts. So in conclusion, I would just like to state that while adding seatbelts to school buses sounds okay and it makes sense, there are many, many reasons why compartmentalization is used currently and should be continued to use rather than adding seatbelts to every school bus. Thank you.